Okay, hello. And today we are talking about creation. Wait, wait. Ugh. There we go. Mistakes were made. All right. So today we are talking about creation. And for that, I have brought my trusty notebook where I make all my notes as I go through the things that I study. And I wanted to just explain the way I personally see and what's the word? Believe, I guess, in creation, the creation process. So today we're just looking at macro creation and micro creation, and we'll see how those two blend together. And then if there's enough time, I'm going to try and keep these things to like 10 minutes or so. If there's time, I've got a very cool little idea I can leave behind, leave you with. I don't know, whatever. Here we go. Okay, so creation. It's a fascinating topic, and the first thing I think I need to just get out there is that I don't believe that creation happened, right? And everything was made, and we are essentially just in this space that has been made, and now we are occupying it, and we're living through it. So creation, in my mind, is a never-ending, ongoing situation. Okay, if I live in the now, okay, then the only thing that I really have is now. The past doesn't exist because at the end of the day, we move from one frame of now into the next. But it is a valuable teacher, and it's good for us because we have memory of it, so it can teach us to move forward. And then the future, in my opinion, is not something we are barreling towards, okay, but rather it is something that needs to be created. Essentially saying that for 5 minutes from now, whatever that future may be, it actually doesn't exist yet. Okay, creation still needs to build up towards when that would happen. Okay, so just getting that out of there. Creation is an ongoing thing. It's not something that it was done and now it's finished. Okay, so creation. Now it's fascinating. A lot of people believe that creation. I know that in certain countries, certain people believe that creation was sung into existence. The universe was sung into existence, and we can also see that even in the Bible, where they say, "In the beginning there was the Word." Now, the Word doesn't mean in the beginning there was a Bible; it just means in the beginning there was a Word. So it stands to reason that it is possible. Okay. That the initial, when the lights went on, when consciousness started, when God started, the intelligent life force that flows through everything, of course, that it happened as energy radiating from there, and that energy had a frequency. Okay, so that energy had a frequency. In other words, it had a certain vibrational state. And if you look at kind of the mystic way of understanding this, it is the highest frequency energy that you can find, and I think a common word for that is that it's the subtlest energy out there, right? So if we are willing to believe that, then we can say that creation is constant, it's never ending. Creation comes from source, from God, from the one. And we can also say that from this, the one, energy is released, right? But that energy is of such a high frequency that it cannot possibly build the reality that we live in, this three-dimensional realm that we have. So I've got notes here, and I'm going to read like a little passage of something that I wrote down, and we are then going to discuss it, right? So creation is a constant and never-ending process through which that which has never been comes into being. The energy that is released from the one is called Om. Okay, so that is the sound of the universe, right? So I'm fairly sure if anyone has studied this for a little bit, we will find that Om is essentially seen as the sound of the universe, which would then be fascinating. And it's a topic I would like to discuss at a later time, where I think Om is the keynote of the universe, and that keynote is on the frequency of love. But that's maybe a different topic for a different time. So looking at that, we can then say that from the one, energy radiates. Okay, energy is released, and then there are two forces that exists, because all creation needs to abide to a couple of rules, right? So initially, when this energy is released, it's now released, but it's not doing anything, right? It's just being released. It's just this never-ending orchestra or symphony that's playing in the background, waiting for it to have an effect on creation. So now we have these two opposing forces that start acting on this energy. The one on the left-hand side or the right-hand side, whichever one you prefer, is an electric force. Electric force is expansive and explosive. It wants to push everything away from itself. And the other force, universal force, if you will, is magnetism. It's that magnetic force. It wants to draw everything towards itself. Okay, so now you've got this energy that's moving, and you've got this electric force and this magnetic force, and it's getting pushed and pulled and pushed and pulled. So now we are starting to see that almost vibrational state. We are starting to see that this energy is actually moving. It's starting to move. And we all know that whenever something stops moving, okay, it technically doesn't exist. Absolutely nothing exists without being able to, at the very least, vibrate. Okay, so now we've got these energies, and they start working, right? And that's where the four primordial or original elements come from. Now, this is not the elements as we think when it comes to Avatar the Airbender, right? Where we can manipulate wind, and we can do things with fire, and we can do things with water. This is primordial elements, right? And the one element attaches itself to this electric force. This is the fire element. It just wants to go. It wants to explode. It wants to expand, right, into whatever there is to expand into, right? And the other one wants to kind of bring things back. It wants to hold things. It's the one is a heat force. The one is a cold force. And this one, the water element attaches itself to this one. So now you've got this heat and this water, this warm and this cold. You've got these two different elements, and they are rubbing against one another because one wants to expand and one wants to pull it back. And between those, you end up seeing this little gap form, and then within this space, we find the primordial air element. Okay, so now it becomes this mediator between your fire element and your water element. It becomes the air element. And that, now suddenly there's a little bit of space between these things. So the expansion can be bigger, and then the contraction can also be a bigger movement. We start seeing bigger movements, right? And ultimately, when all of these three start combining due to the energy that's involved and how they blend, we start seeing that primordial earth element, okay? So the original elements, we can say, is the fire element, the water element, the air element, and ultimately the earth element. And there is a fifth element in this, not Lilu Dallas Multipass. And also a lot of people tend to think that the human spirit is the fifth element. And it's very close. The fifth element, as I see it, is essentially what we call the Akasa force. So that is that subtlest energy frequency that is released into the universe, which is essentially that God frequency, that love frequency that is released. And then all of these combine, and they need to constantly be in motion. You know, as we know, everything vibrates. So even the table you sit on, even myself, we're always vibrating. We're always vibrating, right? So nothing is actually solid matter, but because of its high density, because of its low density, it becomes more solid, right? So everything still needs to vibrate, and that's that electric and magnetic forces. It's just essentially just working all the time, and keeps things in motion, right? Because everything needs to exist in motion. Now, that being said, I wrote this down, and it says Om, or God, radiates the Akasa force, right? The Akasa force then moves with its polarities, okay, and comes into contact with the immutable forces. The immutable forces be electric and magnetic forces, and the elements, and is shaped into being. Okay, we can then receive this energy through our chakras. Okay, so I'm stepping away a little bit. So what we are noticing is that for, let's call it God level energy, for the highest frequency energy, to actually start affecting anything in our realm, in our three-dimensional space, it needs to lower its density, right? So there's different steps on how it does it. So initially it's the pure Akasa force. That then gets worked on, and now suddenly it's trapped in this back and forth motion. And the back and forth motion lowers its density. It then combines with these elements, and the combination of these elements create that earth element, and then ultimately it becomes air element, and then ultimately it becomes the earth element, right? And the earth element is the lowest density of all those potential densities. Now, whether you lean that way and or not, one might say that higher dimensional beings are involved in then receiving that energy, right? And reworking it again through themselves until it becomes an energy that can physically start building things. Now, if that is the macro creation process, everything needs to go through densities from a high density to a low density until ultimately it can be inserted into our three-dimensional realm, our universe that we exist in, our reality. Okay, then that must also mean that we came from somewhere. We came from this process. Okay, and it could be that higher dimensional beings were involved in that shaping of the process. But then we also need to be able to interact with this force, and it's fascinating. So I read up on it a little bit, and they said that there are roughly 88,000 chakra points within the human body, even though we only study the main 7, which we also call the middle pillar, right? Study the main 7 chakra points, but there's 88,000, and these ones are actually connected by these little energy strings, right? Which then has both polarities. So between your top chakra and your middle chakra, there's actually little strings that go like this. And one is the electric force and one is the magnetic force. And so we create this balance. And there's 72,000 of these nadis that interconnect all of these chakra points. Okay, so fascinatingly enough, now let's say macro creation has happened. Okay, we are here, but what is our role? What are we doing, right? In this balance of energy that is constantly being created? How does that get inserted into our three-dimensional realm? Well, that's fascinating. So, as we discussed, energy needs to go from the subtlest source, okay, and it needs to then come down in density, until finally it's ready to go into our three-dimensional space. Now, when we think about this, okay, energy comes in and it goes into your crown chakra, okay? The crown chakra receives this energy and it balances it. It starts balancing that energy and it clears that energy. But what happens is that energy's density increases. It becomes a denser energy once it hits your crown chakra. It moves to your third eye, and once it gets there, again, we see this balancing process that happens. The energy becomes denser. And so for your throat chakra, your heart chakra, and so on, all the way to your root. Okay? And when it gets to root chakra, that last little bit of polishing that we're doing, that last little bit of balancing that we are doing with the energy, it actually increases the density of energy up to its final stage before it can physically become something, before it can be made manifest, right? And we then punch this energy back either into the earth or into the universe. All right. So it's fascinating when you think about this, that we, okay, are focal points of consciousness, that we are. Okay, you can call it your soul, the immortal being. Okay, that's essentially piloting your body that you are in at this moment in time. Okay, radiates that energy as well. We are all one. We are all part of God. We are all of God. So now you're radiating this energy, and your body is almost like a little antenna, right? And it captures the frequencies, and it works it down, it balances out, increases the density all the way to the bottom, and eventually we blast that back into the universe. Now, if you do subscribe to this idea, as I do believe that it's true. I do believe that this is something that is happening, right? And essentially, that means we are constantly taking energy from source and we are pushing it into the universe, which for me explains why the universe keeps on expanding, right? Why the universe keeps on getting bigger, because God in itself keeps on growing and we keep on blasting things into the universe, right? So it has to expand to essentially make space for everything that needs to still go in there, right? And it's fascinating when you think about that. And I like to always say that whenever you feel at your lowest, if you feel like you have done absolutely nothing, you are meaningless, you're pointless, your existence means nothing, I would like you to backtrack 1 second and just realize that by simply existing, you are actively contributing to creation. All right. You are actively a siphon for creation energy, a Kasa force, and blasting it into the universe. And as we know from quantum entanglement, right, that if anything that I do here has a ripple effect into even the universe, right? And everybody's heard about the butterfly effect. A butterfly flaps its wings somewhere and suddenly a tsunami comes in, right? But it's far more than that. In the quantum realm, if you look at it from that perspective, if I snap my fingers here, it could in effect end a star or begin a star or move particles at the opposite end of the universe, because space isn't relevant, right? It's all energy, it's all ripples, it's all waves. So if space isn't relevant, then whatever I'm doing here now in this particular moment is actively contributing to something else that's happening somewhere within our known universe, somewhere within our known realm. And you are taking energy, you are pushing it through your body, and you are pushing it back into the universe, right? And that is a massive thing. You are actively contributing to creation in real time. Okay. So if you ever do feel like you don't matter much, you're not really that important, stop yourself right there and realize that you are co-creating everything that exists, okay? And it's an important thing, I think, to take into oneself and to understand. And for me, that's kind of like a macrocosm look at creation. And what's fascinating about it is everybody has heard the phrase "as above, so below," right? And everybody thinks that's the complete phrase, when in fact it actually isn't. All right. The above one, and I've made a note about this, okay? It comes from the Emerald Tablets, and I think I touched on the Emerald Tablets in the previous video, which is 8,000 years old. And the way it actually should be constructed to itself is as follows, okay? That which is above is from that which is below. And that which is below is from that which is above. Working the miracles of one, as all things were from one. Okay, so essentially saying if we look at the one, okay, and like I like to believe as we are all interconnected, everything within this universe is essentially purely extensions of that, the one, the intelligent life force that flows through all things, okay, that harmony that is essentially playing in the background of the universe, which is God, which is the one, right? And we are all part of that, okay? That means that our microcosm, us as human beings, we see ourselves as a microcosm within this macrocosm of our entire reality that is happening and playing out at this moment in time. However, we also all contain, okay, that macrocosm within ourselves. And according to mysticism, we all have a subtle heart within our heart chakra, and subtle heart essentially being God, right? So we are a microcosm within a macrocosm, but we are also a macrocosm containing a microcosm, which is part of the macrocosm, right? So we are all one. We are all one big thing. And I had another thing that I found was there's a couple of ways to see this. You could always say we are all leaves, different leaves on the same tree. I think that one is fascinating. And the other one that popped into my head has now popped out of my head again, and I have no idea what I wanted to say. As I said before, these things are not scripted, okay? Just for today, to make sure I get my orders correct, I wanted to simply just bring my notebook. Okay, now, that's macro creation. That's an ongoing process, and it affects all of reality, and we are an active contributor. We are an active part of it. And I know I'm already 10 minutes over what I wanted to be, but I'm just going to keep going until I get the next one out, right? I also wanted to just quickly touch on micro creation, right? Smaller creation. Now, if we are all part of this macro creation, we are all part of how things fit together, right? We also, and you've heard this a lot of people that say, oh, I'm going to manifest destiny. I'm going to manifest the life I want. Oh, I'm going to manifest lots of money. And that, okay, this whole manifestation idea is essentially making something out of absolutely nothing. And I unfortunately cannot reconcile my belief systems with that. I don't believe that by writing yourself a check for $1 million, you're just going to end up getting $1 million at some point in time. You can't write down a check for $1 million and go lie down in a gutter and expect it to manifest, right? These things don't happen. So what I would like to look at is how do we then create, as we are creators, co-creators, right? But how do we cause creation, a manifestation, if you want, within our own lives? Okay. Now, there's a lot of principles of the natural law that we typically need to understand before we do this, but I think we can skip a lot of that. We can do a much more detailed and in-depth video on that if people think it's interesting. But I would like to tell you that you can create anything that you want within reason. Remember, everything needs to be logical. We need to be able to explain it with our rational mind, and it needs to resonate with us, right? So if every single person is a co-creator to the reality that we see, remember that you are still constrained by their belief systems. You are still constrained against them. Okay, which means I cannot just simply go to the edge of a river and say, let there be a mountain, and magically a mountain manifests itself out of nowhere. That doesn't work, right? Because we are constraining against everybody's belief of what reality is. So it's not that we can make these miraculous things happen, but we can create in our own lives. And I sum it up in 3 steps. Okay, the way we create things in our own life is care, knowledge, and action. Okay, care, knowledge, and action. So we need to find something that we care a lot about. We need to find something that we care so deeply for that we are willing to do actions required to make it manifest. Okay, and typically we can then, if we understand what that first step means, I would like to replace that word with the word thought. Okay, observation. So we can create nearly anything, right? Within limits, within reason, okay? Through observation, understanding, and action. What does this mean? So, if I am a painter, which I am not, I have no natural talent for those things. If I am a painter and I want to paint something, I first need to create that something in my mind. And this is what I would like to call mindscapes, right? So we create mindscapes. It's a scape that only exists within our mind, but where something we want is already completed. It's already there. So if I want to paint this beautiful painting of a mountain with a river, right? I can't just slapdash it onto a canvas. I need to physically stop and observe. What am I going to create? So I can see it in my mind's eye. I can see the mountain. I can see the river. I can see the trees. So I'm observing this, right? I'm observing exactly what I want to have. I can even see that in this particular painting, I would like a gale force wind to come by. So I can see how the trees are bent because of this wind. So I observe this in the finest details, this construction in my mind of what I want to create. But then I need to understand it. Okay, so then I need to understand, okay, but how the hell do I paint a mountain? How the hell do I paint a river? And do I want the water to look like it's in motion? How the hell do I do that, right? How the hell do I paint wind? For somebody as untalented as myself, I would think it's invisible. It's clearly not. But how would I do that? And we need to build a complete understanding of every little aspect of what we want to have. And if we've done that through action, excuse me, we can bring that thing to life and we can paint a glorious painting, right? Something I wanted in my life a couple of years back is I wanted to make my household a place of peace, an absolute sanctuary for when I come out of the world. I want to come home and it has to be a place of peace, a place of pleasantness, a place of bliss. And initially, I had that thought, and I thought, great, I'm going to make this happen. And it didn't. And I couldn't make it happen, right? And then I realized, oh, crap, of course, I need to observe, I need to understand, and I need to take action. So I sat down and I imagined what my household would be like, right? If everything was at peace, if, What would make my wife happy and what would put her at peace? What would make my children happy? What would put them at peace? Yes, I am old enough to have a wife and children. I'm actually older than most people think. And what would that mean for me, right? What would it truly mean for me to be at peace, to just be happy, to just live a pleasant life? And I had to envision that, right? I had to observe it. I had to see it, right? And then I had to understand, but this thing is going to be a problem. This thing is going to be a problem. We need to put these things in place in order for it to kind of work that way. And it wasn't just one action, it was multiple actions, right? But because I had this clear vision of what I wanted to do, I could observe it. And because I had a thorough understanding of what needed to happen in order to get me there, right? I could bring that through actions. I could essentially bring it into reality. I could make it real for me and for myself. And that's how we create in this life. It's not necessarily manifesting things out of nothing, right? We can't manifest out of nothing. But if we observe and we then build understanding and we then take action, right? We can create anything. Right? Because if you understand things and if you realize that I first need to learn all these skills before this thing is going to be in place, then natural talent, even though it helps a lot, okay, isn't that relevant anymore. It's not that big a deal because I know what needs to happen. I know the route that we need to take, and then I can make it happen. The biggest issue for most people when it comes to creating in their own lives, creating the life they want, okay, it's not the fact that they don't have the power to do it. It's not the fact that they are not capable of doing it. The problem is that we like to envision a life we want, and then we wait for it to come to us, and we wait for it to happen. And that simply doesn't happen. We need to observe, we need to understand, and then we need to take action to bring it into the real world. Even if you have issues, and this is something I've been looking at quite a bit recently, even if I have pent up emotional issues, things in my brain that's giving me issues, nowadays I stop, I observe them, I try to understand them as best I can, and then I speak them into the real world, essentially making them real. Okay, they cannot be ignored. I can't run away from them. I have to deal with them. Okay, and by doing so, I'm now finding better release. So I'm creating the person I want to be simply by observing the elements within myself that I don't like, that I don't want as part of myself, and I'm understanding them and I'm speaking them into reality, and it makes them real, and then it becomes something I can just swat to the side and say, I'm definitely not interested in this, and I don't want this. Okay, so that's essentially just looking at macro creation and the process of it, and then micro creation and the process of it. Now, I wanted to keep this to 10 minutes. I know I said that. Clearly, I am a liar. What I think I'll do in future is if I do make another thing, I do want to talk about another topic, and does end up to be as long as this one, I might split it into 3 parts, right? Part 1, part 2, and part 3, just to make sure that it goes through and that it works. But for now, I'm sorry. Deal with this one. It's going to be a long one. I do see I'm like about 2 minutes away from 30 minutes. So let's make it a round number. So I wanted to read something to you guys. It came to me this morning. Tell me what you think about it, right? I know the comments on the first video was disabled, even though I said leave them on. I don't get it. I don't know why that's happening. Hopefully this one will go better, right? I'm learning this stuff as well. So let me read you this. It's a thought I had this morning, and I just had to write it down because honestly, if I don't write things, I get lots of random thoughts, lots of things that just, I just think, and then if I don't write them down, I'll forget them. So here we go. Universal consciousness is the memory of the one. We all project thoughts and experiences into that universal consciousness, knowingly and or unknowingly. It is God's memory of all that has been, whether made real or in mindscapes. As we are part of the one, we do not possess consciousness, but rather varying levels of access to it. The more access we gain, the more memory we have to draw from. So we are not in actual fact gaining consciousness as we become enlightened, but rather just gaining higher levels of access. Tell me what you think about that. I thought that was pretty cool, and it's a different way for me to think about it. Well, thank you for watching. Again, if you find these videos, disclaimer, completely forgot about a disclaimer. If you don't believe the things I believe, that's perfectly fine. If you believe half of the things I believe, good on you, okay? If you think these things are interesting, then that's perfect. I'm so glad, because honestly, I just have this need to just put these things out there, right? And if anyone that is looking for something maybe different in their lives or a little bit alternative, if they find this and this helps them, I am endlessly thankful for it. Okay, but in no way, shape or form am I trying to change anybody's way of looking at the world and or what they believe. I am not. I just feel like I'm gaining this information and I'm putting all of these things together for myself from all of the different research that I'm doing, from all of the different things I've read and the courses I've taken. And honestly, if it helps anyone, beautiful. And if it's not for you, it's not for you. All right. Thank you for staying with me for this long amount of time. I apologize. I'm going to try and bring these things down. But I do get excited and I do get a little bit lost in myself once I start talking about these things. It is a passion for me, an absolute passion. So yes, thank you and bye-bye.